Right, so picture this. I'm in space. Yep, actual space. The kind of place where the stars are so close you feel like you could reach out and touch them, and the silence is so profound it almost feels like a physical presence. It's both awe-inspiring and terrifying at the same time. Not in a popping down to Tesco for a pint of milk kind of way, but in a plummeting towards an uncharted planet with my spaceship on fire kind of way. The kind of situation that makes you question all your life choices up to that point. You know, the usual. Not exactly ideal, is it? The alarms were blaring, smoke was filling the cockpit, and my trusty old ship, the rusty spanner, don't ask, was making noises that would make a mechanic weep. It was like the universe had decided to throw every possible disaster at me all at once. I braced myself for impact, closed my eyes, and hoped for the best. In those few seconds, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Would I survive? What would happen if I didn't? Would anyone even know what happened to me out here in the vastness of space, which, let's be honest, wasn't much at that point. My confidence was at an all-time low, and the odds were definitely not in my favor. But hey, when you're plummeting towards an alien planet, you don't have much time to dwell on the negatives. The crash landing was, to put it mildly, eventful. The kind of eventful that leaves you questioning the very fabric of reality. The ship shook violently, metal screeched, and I could feel the heat of the flames even through my suit. It was like being in the middle of a fiery tornado. Imagine being shaken like a cocktail at a rave, except the cocktail is on fire and the rave is inside a washing machine on spin cycle. Not fun. Every bone in my body felt like it was being rattled apart, and the noise was deafening. It was chaos, pure and simple. When I finally came to, my head was spinning, and I had a crick in my neck that could rival the Tower of Pisa. My vision was blurry, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was or what had happened. Slowly, the memories came flooding back, and I realized just how lucky I was to be alive. I stumbled out of the wreckage, miraculously in one piece, and surveyed my surroundings. The landscape was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Alien, yet strangely beautiful. It was a stark reminder of just how far from home I really was. That's when it hit me. I wasn't on Earth anymore. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. I was on an alien planet with no way of knowing if it was inhabited or if I'd ever be able to get back home. The sky was purple, the trees were blue, and there was a group of women staring at me like I'd just crash-landed in the middle of their afternoon tea party. Their expressions ranged from shock to curiosity to outright anger. It was clear that my arrival was not a welcome one, and trust me, they were not pleased. I had just disrupted their lives in the most dramatic way possible, and I had no idea how to make it right. All I could do was stand there, feeling like the universe's biggest idiot, and hope that they wouldn't decide to take their anger out on me. Now, I consider myself a relatively well-adjusted chap. I've been through my fair share of adventures, seen things that would make most people question their sanity. From the icy plains of Europa to the fiery pits of Io, I've faced dangers that would make even the bravest souls tremble. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I was about to encounter. I can handle a spot of bother, a bit of a kerfuffle. I've navigated asteroid fields, outwitted space pirates, and even survived a close encounter with a black hole. But this was different. This was something out of a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for the sight before me. As I stepped out of my spaceship, the landscape around me seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. The air was thick with a sweet, intoxicating scent, and the ground beneath my feet felt almost alive, pulsating with a strange energy. These women, these alien women, were, well, stunning doesn't even begin to cover it. They were ethereal, like something out of a legend or a fairy tale. Their presence was almost overwhelming, a blend of beauty and power that left me breathless. They were tall and statuesque, with skin that shimmered like moonlight and eyes that could rival 1,000 galaxies. Each one of them seemed to radiate a soft, luminescent glow, casting an enchanting light on everything around them. Their hair flowed like waterfalls, cascading down their backs in hues of silver and gold. It was mesmerizing, the way it caught the light and seemed to dance with every movement they made. I couldn't help but stare, completely entranced by their otherworldly beauty And their clothing, or lack thereof, well, let's just say it left very little to the imagination. Their attire was minimal, to say the least, accentuating their flawless forms and leaving me feeling more than a little self-conscious in my bulky spacesuit. I must have looked like a right sight, standing there in my tattered spacesuit, hair a mess, covered in soot and grime. Compared to their pristine elegance, I felt like a clumsy oaf, completely out of place in this surreal setting. A proper state, as my mum would say. I could almost hear her voice in my head, chiding me for not making a better first impression. But there was no time for self-pity. I had to find a way to communicate with these enigmatic beings. I tried to speak, to explain myself, but all that came out was a strangled croak. Brilliant, just brilliant. My mind was racing, trying to find the right words, but my tongue seemed to have a mind of its own, refusing to cooperate.
One of the women, the tallest of the bunch with eyes like molten gold, stepped forward. Her gaze was intense, piercing through me as if she could see into my very soul. There was a commanding presence about her, a sense of authority that made it clear she was the leader. She spoke in a language I didn't understand, but her tone was clear. I was trespassing on sacred ground. Her words were sharp, almost musical, and though I couldn't grasp their meaning, the message was unmistakable. I had intruded where I didn't belong. And judging by the way she was eyeing my spaceship, which was now most definitely a smouldering heap of scrap metal, I had some explaining to do. The wreckage of my ship lay scattered around us, a stark contrast to the serene beauty of the landscape. I could feel the weight of her gaze, and I knew that my actions had consequences. This was not just a simple misunderstanding, it was a grave offense, and I had to find a way to make amends.
Turns out I'd crash-landed on Xylor, a planet populated entirely by women, and not just any women, mind you. These women possessed a power that would make even the most seasoned Jedi Master green with envy. They called it the Flow, a mystical energy that connected them to the planet and each other. Their culture was as fascinating as it was baffling. They communicated telepathically, which made for some awkward silences in the beginning, let me tell you. They valued harmony, balance, and inner peace, which again, not exactly my strong suits. And their idea of a good time involved meditating under waterfalls and communing with nature. Food was another adventure altogether. Gone were the days of a good old-fashioned cuppa and a bacon butty. On Xylor, they subsisted on a diet of glowing fruits, shimmering vegetables, and something called nutrient nectar that tasted suspiciously like liquid grass. Don't get me wrong, it was all very impressive, but a part of me longed for the familiar comforts of Earth, a good book, a comfy chair, and a nice cup of tea, preferably without the threat of intergalactic war looming overhead. Now, you'd think being the only bloke on a planet full of beautiful women would be a dream come true, wouldn't you? Imagine it. A paradise where you're the center of attention, surrounded by exotic beauty and endless admiration. It sounds like the ultimate fantasy, right? But let me tell you, reality has a funny way of twisting those dreams into something entirely unexpected. And don't get me wrong, it had its moments. There were times when I felt like the luckiest man alive, basking in the affection and curiosity of these incredible beings. We shared laughter, stories, and even a few awkward cultural exchanges that left us all in stitches. But it was also a tad overwhelming, to say the least. Take Lyra, for instance. She was the first to find me, and from that moment on, my life was never the same. She was the one with the molten gold eyes who'd first found me by my crashed spaceship. Her gaze was intense, almost as if she could see right through me, and it was both fascinating and terrifying. Strong, fierce, a natural leader. Lyra embodied everything that was both awe-inspiring and intimidating about this new world. She had a way of commanding respect without uttering a single word, and I often found myself trying to live up to her expectations. She took it upon herself to teach me the ways of Xylor, which mostly involved me falling over during meditation, misinterpreting telepathic messages, and accidentally setting fire to things with my laser screwdriver. It was a steep learning curve, to say the least, but through all the mishaps and misunderstandings, Lyra remained patient, albeit with a hint of exasperation.
Then there was Alara, with her cascading silver hair and eyes like a summer sky. She was the polar opposite of Lyra, embodying a serene and calming presence that was a balm to my often frazzled nerves. She was a healer, a gentle soul who could calm even the fiercest storm. Her touch was soothing, and her voice had a melodic quality that could lull even the most restless mind into a state of peace. She patched me up after my crash, patiently taught me about the flow, and seemed endlessly amused by my clumsiness. Alara had this way of making even my most embarrassing moments feel like part of a grand adventure, and her laughter was infectious.
Let's not forget Anya, the fiery redhead with a mischievous glint in her eye. She was the spark that kept things interesting, always ready to stir the pot and challenge the status quo. She was a whirlwind of energy, always up for a challenge, and never missed an opportunity to tease me about my primitive ways. Anya had a knack for pushing my buttons, but in a way that made me want to rise to the occasion and prove myself.
And then, there was Kara, the young one who always had a joke ready, lightening the mood whenever things got too intense. Her youthful exuberance was a breath of fresh air, and she had a way of making even the most dire situations seem manageable. She quickly became my guide to the lighter side of Xylor, showing me that even in the strangest of places, you could always find a friend. Kara's laughter was a constant reminder that no matter how alien things seemed, there was always room for joy and connection.